It's all right, sweetie. You're safe with us up here. Everything is going to be just fine. It's all right. You're safe with us. Everything is going to be okay.
The first-class cabin smelled of polished leather and recycled perfume. Sunlight bounced off the gold-trimmed seatbacks, making the aisle shimmer. Maya Thompson pressed her hands over her face, trying to stifle her sobs, but the stifling warmth of the cabin turned each tiny cry into a thunderclap. "Excuse me, miss," the flight attendant said, her voice too tight, her smile brittle. "This isn't your seat." Maya blinked, disbelief freezing her. I have a ticket," she whispered, her voice cracking. The laminated boarding pass trembled in her hand. The woman's lips curled into something almost resembling sympathy but veiled in a sharp edge. "I don't care what your ticket says. First class is for those who belong here." Heat flared in Maya's chest. Not anger, not yet, only shock. Around her, other passengers shifted in their seats. Some stared wide-eyed. Others looked away. No one moved to intervene. Then the voice came, low, authoritative, slicing through the murmurs. "Honey, maybe you should." Maya's mother squeezed her hand, eyes scanning for an ally. But even in that moment, fear rooted them. The flight's metallic roar filled her ears as tears spilled unchecked, wetting her sleeve, staining the crisp white of her dress. A sudden shadow fell across her lap. She looked up and froze. The airline owner herself, impeccably dressed, towering in the aisle, eyes like polished steel. Silence swallowed the cabin. Every passenger, every whispered excuse, every stifled cough vanished. Maya realized she was on the edge of something dangerous, something public, and something powerful, and it all hinged on the next words out of that woman's mouth. The hum of the jet engines vibrated through Maya Thompson's legs as she and her mother stepped into the first-class cabin. Light streamed in from the oversized windows, glinting off polished leather and chrome accents. Maya's chest tightened. She had dreamed of this trip for months. An overnight flight to New York, a chance to visit her aunt and escape the cramped suburban streets she hated. "Seats 3A and 3B, the flight attendant instructed, not unkindly. But her eyes lingered a fraction too long on Maya. Maya's mother offered the ticket. "Here, these are our seats." The attendant glanced down, then up, and a small, sharp smile flickered. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's been a mistake. This section isn't for you." Maya froze. "Mistake?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "We booked these seats months ago." "Like I said," the attendant's tone tightened. "This section isn't suitable." Heat rose to Maya's cheeks. The words stung more than she expected. Around her, passengers shifted. Some looked away, uncomfortable. A man in a navy suit fiddled with his watch. A woman adjusted her designer scarf. Silence, oppressive and thick, hung over the cabin. Maya's mother stepped forward. "Excuse me, you'll need to let her sit. We have confirmation." Her hands trembled slightly. The flight attendant's smile sharpened. "I don't make the rules." Maya's hands tightened over her boarding pass. Her mother's voice wavered but firmed. "We paid for these seats. She has a right to sit here." From the back of the cabin came a slow, measured clap. Maya's stomach dropped. The airline owner herself was walking toward them, heels clicking against the aisle floor. Perfectly poised, suit tailored, hair immaculate. Her eyes locked on Maya. "Young lady," she said, voice smooth as silk. "Why are you crying?" Maya swallowed. She wanted to explain. She wanted to vanish. Her mother held her shoulder. "Because she doesn't belong here," the flight attendant said, louder this time, as if the owner's presence were irrelevant. Hush fell. The airline owner raised a hand, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Is that so?" Maya's breath caught. The words hung like a guillotine. Eyes from every corner of the cabin followed, some with curiosity, some with judgment. Every whispered comment, every judgmental glance, pressed down on her chest. Her mother clenched Maya's hand. "It's fine, honey," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. The owner's gaze flicked from Maya to the attendant. Well, she said, slow, deliberate. Let's see what we can do about that. Maya blinked. Her tears had dried to streaks down her cheeks. She sensed the weight of everyone's attention, the uncertainty of what would come next. One word, one decision, and everything could change. The cabin remained still. Every passenger waited. Every heartbeat echoed. Maya realized the world wasn't fair, and the next moment would prove it. The airline owner's heels clicked against the aisle floor like a metronome, each step counting down the seconds of Maya's suspended panic. She was small, 14, and yet the owner's gaze made her feel like every inch of the cabin was scrutinizing her. Every whisper, every phone camera, every stifled cough magnified her shame. Miss Thompson, the owner began, voice smooth, almost polite, yet edged with steel. What brings you to first class today? Maya's mother swallowed. We're visiting family in New York. We booked these seats months ago. The owner's eyes flicked to Maya, sharp and calculating. Do you always sit here, young lady? First class. It's not for everyone, you know. Maya's stomach churned. Her mother opened her mouth to speak but hesitated, glancing at the attendant who now hovered behind them like a sentinel. A soft, amused chuckle escaped the owner. You see, she continued, there are certain expectations in first class. People observe. Behavior, manners, appearance. Her gaze swept over Maya, lingering just long enough to make her shrink under its weight. Do you meet them? Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to vanish. She wanted someone, anyone, to stand up for her. The passengers were watching. Some were filming, some merely curious, but none dared intervene. Her mother's hand squeezed hers. She's a child. She's a student. She's polite, and she has every right to be here, she said, her voice firm but betraying a quiver of fear. The owner's lips curved in a slow, deliberate smile. Of course, of course. She leaned slightly closer, voice dropping. But tell me, how do you handle confrontation? People judge quickly. They decide if someone belongs based on a glance, a word, a hesitation. Can you hold your own when that happens? Maya blinked. She hadn't expected a question like that. Her chest tightened, a storm of frustration and fear twisting in her stomach. I try my best, she whispered. The owner's gaze narrowed, almost imperceptibly. Is that the truth, or the answer you think people want to hear? Maya's hands trembled. The words felt heavy, each one a test she didn't know she could pass. She thought about the whispered comments, the judgmental eyes, the stares that had followed her from the boarding gate to the aisle. She felt small, yet something in her, a spark of defiance, stirred. The attendant shifted behind them. Ma'am, perhaps we should. Quiet, the owner snapped, sharp enough to silence the woman instantly. Her eyes returned to Maya. I ask the questions here. Hush fell. Maya's mother looked down at her daughter, silently urging her to answer. Maya's mind raced. Speak too softly, and the owner might dismiss her. Speak too loudly, and she might provoke further humiliation. I don't let fear stop me, Maya said finally, voice steadier than she expected. Even when people assume I don't belong. The owner's eyes lingered on her, calculating. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched her lips. Good. Courage is commendable. But so is discretion. You understand the difference, yes? Maya's mother tensed. The words felt like a warning disguised as advice. We understand, she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her unease. The owner straightened. Very well. She paused, letting her words sink in. First class isn't just a seat. It's a space governed by perception, by confidence, by who people think you are. Her gaze swept the cabin. You, young lady, have shown me something interesting. Perhaps you do belong here, but only if you prove it. Maya's heart thudded violently. Prove it. The words were heavy, their meaning ambiguous. Was this a chance for vindication, or a prelude to further humiliation. Around them, the cabin buzzed with quiet tension. Phones still recorded, whispers still floated, and the flight attendant now glanced at the floor, lips pressed thin, caught between her own authority and the owner's. "Sit down, please," the owner said finally, her tone both command and invitation. Maya obeyed, sliding into her seat like a bird returning to a cage. Her mother settled beside her, still clutching her hand, eyes scanning the aisle for threats she couldn't name. The owner lingered a moment longer, observing Maya. Her face was unreadable, polished, carefully neutral, but the glint in her eyes betrayed a sharp curiosity, an analytical edge that made Maya feel both exposed and weighed. Then, as suddenly as she had arrived, the owner turned and strode toward the front of the plane. Each step echoed like a verdict. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to collect herself. Her hands still shook. Her mother whispered, "It's over for now." Maya didn't know if it was over. The owner's eyes, her words, the weight of judgment, they lingered. A single phrase from earlier rattled in her mind. "You have shown me something interesting. Perhaps you do belong here, but only if you prove it." The test had begun. And Maya understood, with a clarity that made her stomach twist, that the flight would be more than just a journey to New York. It would be a trial. Somewhere behind the gleaming seats, a camera flashed. Somewhere in the cabin, someone whispered. And Maya, trembling but upright, realized that everyone watching would soon see who she really was, and whether the world would allow her to exist in a space it had long assumed she could not. By the time the plane landed in New York, Maya Thompson felt as though the cabin had become a cage lined with whispers. The metallic roar of the engines was replaced by murmurs, soft coughs, and the occasional click of a smartphone camera. Somewhere, someone had already uploaded the confrontation. "Mom, look." Maya's voice trembled as she pointed to her own reflection in the glossy aisle wall. The video was already making the rounds, her tear-streaked face, her mother's flustered attempts to intervene, the attendant's sharp dismissal, and most hauntingly, the owner's inscrutable smirk. Her mother groaned, gripping the straps of her bag as if bracing for impact. We need to deal with this carefully." But carefully felt like an impossible word in a world that moved at the speed of viral outrage. By the time they retrieved their luggage, the video had been shared on social media accounts with thousands of followers. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, many cruel, and several thinly veiled with excuses that justified the flight attendant's behavior. "People can be awful," her mother whispered, sliding her hand over Maya's trembling fingers. "But we can't let them see you afraid." Maya nodded, though her chest was heavy with humiliation. The images of herself crying, replayed endlessly on a stranger's phone, felt like an invisible hand pressing her down, showing her to the world as an example of what someone like her should feel. She couldn't breathe properly. She wanted to disappear into the sea of travelers spilling from the terminal. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Headlines glared. Teen girl humiliated in first class. Airline faces backlash. Who really belongs in first class? Viral video sparks debate on race and privilege. Each ping was a reminder that the moment in the cabin had escaped her control. At a nearby cafe, they tried to collect themselves. Her mother sipped tea with a trembling hand, scrolling through advocacy pages and news threads. "Look, Maya, we can respond. People care. People are on your side." Maya shook her head. "It doesn't feel like they do. It feels like everyone is watching me and judging me and laughing." "Not everyone," her mother said softly, but the unspoken truth lingered. The world often didn't see children like Maya as innocent. Her blackness, her youth, her very presence in first class had been enough to invite judgment. Her mother tapped a few keys, calling advocacy groups, journalists, and lawyers. "We'll get ahead of this. We'll make sure your voice is heard. Not just the video. Not just the narrative that's out there." Maya stared at her reflection in the polished table. She barely recognized the girl staring back. Wet cheeks, wide eyes, a trembling jaw. It was her, yet it wasn't. Somewhere in that blurred space between humiliation and outrage, she felt a strange power stir. The world had assumed she would shrink. She hadn't. Not completely. At home that evening, the video had already gone viral on multiple platforms. A local news outlet picked up the story, framing it with cautious sympathy. Family speaks out after teen's confrontation in first-class cabin sparks social debate. On television, her tearful face repeated over and over. The flight attendant and the owner were mentioned carefully, almost as footnotes, while Maya's pain was center stage. Maya's mother held her, rocking her gently. "People are seeing what happened," she whispered. "And it matters that they do." But Maya felt raw. Suppose. Her thoughts spiraled. Every judgmental glance, every silent passenger, every laugh online. It was all a weight she hadn't asked to carry. She felt powerless, yet somewhere inside determination flickered. If people saw this, she thought, then maybe they could also see the injustice. "Mom," she said finally, voice small but determined. "I want them to know it wasn't fair. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I want them to see her, the owner and the attendant. I want them to know what happened." Her mother nodded, brushing a wet strand of hair from Maya's forehead. "We'll make sure they do. We'll make sure it counts for more than just a viral moment." Later that night, Maya couldn't sleep. Her phone buzzed endlessly with alerts, retweets, comments, messages from friends and strangers alike. Some were supportive. Some were cruel. Some assumed they knew the whole story after 15 seconds of video. She closed her eyes and tried to shut it out, but the memory of the owner's calculating gaze and the attendant's sharp dismissal burned in her mind. She realized something chilling. The world didn't see her as a person. It saw her as a symbol. And symbols could be twisted. Symbols could be weaponized. But she also realized something vital. If she could speak, if she could tell her story, then maybe the narrative could shift. Maybe the world could see her truth, not just her tears. Her mother stirred beside her. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We start tomorrow. You're not alone in this, Maya." Maya swallowed, the lump in her throat heavy, her hands clenched. She didn't yet know how or through whom, but a plan began to form. She would take back her story, her dignity, her power. The humiliation wasn't over, but the fight had begun. And somewhere in the dark of her room, she made a silent promise. The airline, the owner, and the attendant would face the consequences. The world would watch. Not just her tears, but her resolve. A week after the viral incident, Maya Thompson sat in a sleek conference room at the airline's corporate office. The walls were glass, modern and cold, reflecting her anxiety back at her. Her mother held her hand across the table, grounding her, even as the city outside hummed indifferently. The airline owner entered quietly, impeccably dressed, her heels silent on the polished floor. She carried a folder and a phone, her expression unreadable. Maya's heart raced. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a test. A subtle, invisible trap where a single misstep could spiral into further humiliation. "Thank you for coming," the owner began, voice smooth as silk, yet each word edged with precision. "I've watched the coverage, read the commentary, and I wanted to hear directly from you, Maya." Maya shifted in her seat. Her mother gave a subtle squeeze of reassurance. "We're here to explain what happened. To set the record straight." The owner's gaze flicked to her mother. "Of course. But let's focus on the young lady. She experienced quite a moment in our first-class cabin. Tell me, Maya, how did that feel?" Maya swallowed. The memory of the flight attendant's sharp dismissal, the whispers of passengers, the flashing cameras, everything crowded her mind. It felt like I didn't belong," she said finally, voice steady but tight. "Like people assumed who I was before they even looked at me." The owner's eyes narrowed just slightly, a glimmer of curiosity, or perhaps calculation, flitting across her face. "And your mother?" She seemed protective. "Did you feel safe?" Maya's mother chimed in. "I tried to be. I did everything I could. But when authority figures treat you like you're invisible, it's terrifying." The owner nodded slowly, folding her hands. "I see. And the attendant? Did her behavior surprise you? Maya's jaw tightened. No. It hurt, but I expected it. People like her judge first and think later. But the way she spoke, it wasn't just rude. It was dismissive of everything I am. Interesting, the owner murmured, leaning back slightly. And yet you handled it with poise, restraint, courage even. That's remarkable for someone your age. Maya blinked. Was this praise? Or a trap? Her mother's hand squeezed hers again. The owner's voice dropped. But do you understand why people react this way? First class is a curated environment. People observe, judge, and react to the unfamiliar. They assume norms, expectations, behaviors. You challenged them. I didn't challenge them, Maya said quietly but firmly. I just existed. And they decided I didn't belong. A faint smile appeared on the owner's lips. Precisely. That's what makes this situation complex. She tapped the folder on the table. I want to offer you something, Maya. A chance to reclaim the narrative. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Could this be an apology? A gesture of fairness? Or another manipulation? The owner continued, her tone calm, almost conversational. You can tell your story in your own words. We'll share it on our platforms. Highlight your courage, your mother's advocacy, and the lesson learned. It's an opportunity to control the narrative, before the world continues to misinterpret it. Maya exchanged a glance with her mother. The offer was tempting, but trust was fragile. And the attendant, the staff, will they face consequences? The owner's gaze sharpened, brief and cold. We are reviewing the incident. But this isn't about punishment. It's about understanding. About accountability. Everyone involved has their side to tell. You have yours. Maya nodded, absorbing the words. There was a subtle power play at work. Control masked as generosity. But she felt something stirring inside her. Recognition that her voice could matter. She could speak and people might listen. The owner leaned forward slightly, voice soft but authoritative. Remember, Maya, courage is commendable, but discretion is vital. You've experienced judgment and assumption firsthand. How you respond now will define not just this moment, but your future. Maya's mother interjected, firm. We understand. And we expect honesty from everyone. Not just my daughter. The owner's eyes flicked between them, almost as if weighing their resolve. Very well. You have 10 minutes with my media team tomorrow. Speak your truth. Control what you can. Everything else is out of your hands. After the meeting, Maya and her mother walked down the lobby, their footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Outside, the city's lights glittered, indifferent to the struggle they carried. Maya's mother spoke softly, almost to herself. This is just the beginning. But you were brave today. And you'll be braver tomorrow. Maya nodded, fists clenched at her sides. Courage, restraint, control. Words that had once felt abstract now carried weight. She understood the stakes. The airline owner's offer was a lifeline, but also a gauntlet. Every choice would ripple outward, watched, judged, dissected. That night, back at their hotel, Maya stared at her reflection. Her face was calm, but inside a storm brewed. She had survived the flight. She had survived the confrontation. But the real challenge, the fight for her story, her dignity, her truth, was only beginning. And in the quiet hum of the city beyond the window, she felt it. The eyes of a world ready to witness her courage, her defiance, her resistance. She was no longer just a victim. She was a participant in the story, a co-author of her destiny. And she would not let it be rewritten. The next morning, Maya's mother was already on the phone with a civil rights attorney. Her voice brisk, precise, carrying the weight of someone determined to fight. Maya sat beside her, phone in hand, scrolling through the storm of online commentary. The viral video had evolved overnight into a full-blown debate. She's 14, her mother said, tone low but firm. And this airline humiliated her publicly. They can't just sweep this under the rug. Maya swallowed. The comments were brutal. She shouldn't have cried. Why is she in first class if she can't handle it? Typical entitlement. Some were sympathetic, some cruel, but all of them felt like a punch in the chest. The lawyer's voice came over speakerphone. We can file a formal complaint against the airline for discriminatory treatment. There's a record of witnesses, the flight video, and multiple social media accounts. But be prepared. The company will defend itself aggressively. Maya's mother nodded, jotting notes. We're ready. We need to make sure the story is told accurately. That's the most important thing. Maya felt a mix of relief and dread. Legal action felt like power, but also a heavier responsibility. Every word spoken, every decision made, would be dissected publicly. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her small shoulders. The day stretched on. Emails from advocacy groups, journalists, and even concerned strangers poured in. Some offered guidance, some outrage, some both. Maya read each one carefully, learning for the first time how bureaucracy, public perception, and social media intersected to amplify injustice. Her mother leaned over, pointing at an email thread. Look, they want to interview you. They want to hear your perspective, not just the viral clip. Maya's stomach twisted. Speaking publicly, giving a voice to her humiliation, seemed terrifying but necessary. She realized that the silence of the first-class passengers had followed her home, amplified by every retweet, every comment. That evening, a representative from the airline called. Their voice was practiced, careful. We're reviewing the incident. We want to ensure fairness. We value all passengers. Maya's mother responded evenly, though firm. It's not just fairness. It's accountability. You humiliated a child in a public space. There needs to be acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The conversation ended with polite but empty reassurances. The airline was preparing a formal statement, but the words felt hollow. Maya's mother turned to her, eyes serious. This is the part that's difficult. Systems protect themselves. Institutions rarely admit fault easily. Maya nodded, internalizing the lesson. It wasn't enough to cry or protest quietly. Change required strategy, persistence, and courage. The following days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and interviews. Maya practiced speaking clearly, making sure her words reflected her truth without being twisted. She realized how carefully she had to navigate tone, phrasing, and emotion. One misstep, one word out of place, could undermine the entire effort. Meanwhile, the social media storm continued. Some news outlets framed Maya as the courageous teen, while others focused on the viral clip alone, ignoring context. She learned quickly how public perception could be manipulated, how narratives were contested, and how easily victims became symbols rather than people. Her mother tried to shield her from the worst of the vitriol, but there was no escaping it entirely. Every phone notification, every mention of her name carried weight. Maya learned to control her responses, to pause before reacting, to seek support from her mother and allies. By the end of the week, the airline had issued a brief statement. It acknowledged the incident but couched it in vague language. We regret any distress caused to our passengers and are reviewing procedures. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of discrimination. Maya's mother read it aloud, frustration pressing into her voice. They don't get it. They don't see how deeply this affected her. Maya stared at the screen, hands clenched. She realized then that the fight wasn't just against one person. It was against an entire system that enabled and excused injustice. Social norms, corporate policies, and public indifference were all hurdles she would have to navigate. And yet, despite the frustration, Maya felt a spark of determination. This wasn't just about her humiliation anymore. It was about holding the airline accountable, challenging assumptions, and ensuring that others wouldn't endure the same invisible violence she had. Her mother squeezed her hand. We'll keep pushing. We'll make them listen. You're not alone in this. Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. She felt small, yes, and exposed, but also resilient. The viral video that had threatened to define her life had also created a platform to speak truth to power. In that moment, she understood something vital. The path ahead would be long, arduous, and full of resistance. But for the first time she felt that she could endure it and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. The following week, Maya Thompson's life became a tightrope of public scrutiny. Social media was a double-edged sword, an ally and an adversary in the same breath. Every new article, every comment thread, every retweet amplified her humiliation and her voice simultaneously. Some posts praised her courage. She stood up for herself. Every parent should teach their children that. Others were cruel, subtly or overtly racist. First class is for those who belong, not children who cry. She's entitled. Her mom should have handled her better. Each comment hit like a small sting, a reminder that the world could be cruel even when it appeared supportive. At school, whispers followed her in the hallways. Friends offered quiet support, but others looked at her differently, some with pity, others with envy. Maya felt her identity fracture under observation. She was a student, a daughter, a teenager, but now also a symbol of viral controversy. Her mother, ever vigilant, insisted on strategy. We control what we can. Ignore the rest. Remember, the airline is trying to discredit you. Maya leaned over her laptop, reviewing screenshots of online comments from airline staff and trolls. Some were subtly threatening. Others painted her as overdramatic, demanding, a troublemaker. Every attempt by the airline to downplay the incident had a ripple effect. Friends of staff posted comments, some journalists took quotes out of context, and the narrative seemed to teeter dangerously toward victim blaming. I can't believe how far this is spreading, Maya said, voice tight. I just want it to stop. I want people to see what really happened, not this circus. Her mother nodded. Then we'll make them see. We'll show the truth. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with evidence and clarity. The first line of defense was documentation. Maya meticulously catalogued screenshots, saved videos, and recorded statements from witnesses, fellow passengers who had seen the confrontation. Every detail mattered. The flight attendant's tone, the owner's smirk, the silence of the cabin. Evidence was power, and Maya had more than anyone realized. Meanwhile, the airline doubled down. A press release portrayed the event as an unfortunate misunderstanding, shifting blame subtly onto passengers who caused disruptions. Internal communications leaked online, suggesting that staff had been coached to describe Maya's behavior as overly emotional and disruptive. The company seemed more concerned with optics than justice. Maya's mother called a press conference. We are here to correct the record, she told the assembled reporters, her voice steady despite exhaustion. My daughter was humiliated publicly because of assumptions about her age, race, and appearance. This is not just about one incident. It's about systemic inequities that allow such treatment to continue unchecked. Maya's voice trembled when she spoke, but she held the microphone, making her words precise, undeniable. I did nothing wrong, she said. I was in my seat. I had a ticket. I was treated like I didn't belong because of who I am. People need to know that this isn't okay. Not just for me, but for anyone who faces assumptions based on appearance or race. The room buzzed with the weight of her words. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled notes, and the press release circulated rapidly online. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Yet retaliation didn't stop. Airline staff, some anonymous, continued subtle harassment online, questioning her credibility. Some passengers criticized her in comment threads. The sheer volume of attacks was exhausting. But Maya adapted. She learned to filter what mattered, respond selectively, and lean on allies. Journalists, advocacy groups, and supportive friends. She recognized the patterns. Systemic bias hiding behind bureaucracy, power wielded subtly, and public opinion swayed by perception more than fact. In private moments, Maya allowed herself anger, but she transformed it into strategy. Each insult, each smear, each attempt to discredit her became fuel. She wrote statements, rehearsed interviews, and rehearsed calmness, even when fury surged. Resistance, she realized, was both a shield and a weapon. By the end of the week, small victories emerged. Several witnesses came forward publicly, corroborating Maya's account. Online posts and articles began framing her courage as central, rather than the incident alone. The airline statement appeared weaker against mounting evidence and public pressure. One evening, Maya sat at her desk, exhausted, scrolling through social media. The latest post showed a supportive headline: "Teen confronts airline discrimination, public outcry grows." She exhaled deeply, allowing herself a small sense of relief. Her mother came in, holding 2 cups of tea. "See, people are listening. You're being heard. And they're realizing the truth." Maya nodded, sipping her tea. "It's still exhausting. I feel like I have to fight constantly, just to be seen as human." "That's what courage looks like," her mother said softly. "It's hard and it's tiring. But look at how far you've come in just a week. You've resisted. You've reclaimed some control. That's remarkable." Maya stared out the window at the city lights, glittering and indifferent, yet now carrying the faint warmth of recognition. The airline had tried to manipulate perception, but resistance had begun to tip the scales. Her fight was far from over, but for the first time she felt the weight of power returning, not absolute but enough to demand justice. And in that moment, Maya realized something profound. Resistance wasn't just about confronting others. It was about claiming space, asserting dignity, and refusing to be erased. The day of the press event, the air in the conference hall was taut with anticipation. Cameras lined the stage, reporters shuffled papers, and the faint hum of chatter buzzed through the crowd. Maya Thompson sat beside her mother, her hands folded tightly in her lap, nerves coiled like steel springs. She could feel every eye on her, every flash of the cameras magnifying her presence. The airline owner arrived quietly, accompanied by her assistant, her expression impeccable, mask-like. She acknowledged the crowd with a brief nod before taking her place at the podium. Maya's stomach twisted. This was the moment of reckoning, not just for her, but for every assumption, every whispered excuse, every glance that had dismissed her as unworthy. The owner began with practiced calm. "We are here to clarify recent events on one of our flights. Our company values all passengers equally and..." Her words were carefully measured, rehearsed for optics rather than truth. Maya felt the tension coil in her chest. She recognized the language of evasion, accountability without responsibility, politeness over acknowledgement. When it was her turn, Maya stepped to the microphone, shoulders squared despite the quiver in her hands. The cameras trained on her like a spotlight she couldn't escape. She breathed deeply, trying to let each word land with precision. "I am Maya Thompson," she began, voice steady. "I was treated unfairly on your flight because of my race and age. I had a ticket. I was in my seat. And yet I was told I didn't belong here. That experience was humiliating, terrifying, and public." A murmur rippled through the room. Maya glanced at her mother, who offered a reassuring squeeze of the hand. The words felt heavy, but necessary, each one a small act of defiance against the injustice that had tried to erase her presence. "Your employees assumed things about me," Maya continued, voice gaining strength. "Assumptions about who I am and where I belong. They judged before they even looked. And that judgment didn't just end in the air. It followed me online, in the media, and into my life." The owner's jaw tightened subtly. Her polite mask remained, but a flicker of irritation betrayed her. Maya felt it. A subtle crack in the armor, a glimpse of vulnerability in the woman who had wielded authority so effortlessly. "I'm not asking for sympathy," Maya said, her voice rising slightly. "I am asking for accountability. This isn't just about me. It's about fairness, about dignity, about ensuring no one else experiences this kind of public humiliation." A journalist leaned forward, microphone extended. "Do you feel the airline has learned from this?" Maya glanced briefly at the owner before answering. "I hope they have. But hope isn't enough. Action is what matters. Public statements and vague apologies do not undo what happened. True accountability is measured by change, and by recognition of wrongdoing. The owner's assistant shifted uneasily behind the podium. Whispers circulated, staff exchanging glances. The carefully curated image of corporate poise was beginning to falter under the weight of truth spoken plainly by a 14-year-old girl. Maya continued, her confidence growing. I've received messages from people who understand now because they saw what I experienced. That's important. But it doesn't excuse the harm. People need to understand that assumptions, microaggressions, and abuse of power are real, and they have consequences. The owner's lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth, hesitated, and then, unusually, allowed silence to settle. Maya felt the moment stretch, a quiet victory in itself. This woman, who had once towered over her in the aisle, was now forced to listen, forced to reckon with her actions in a very public arena. Change doesn't happen quietly, Maya said softly, yet every word cut through the room like a blade. And those who wield power have a responsibility to ensure fairness, not just enforce appearances. Finally the owner spoke, her voice measured but slightly strained. We acknowledge that the situation caused distress. Our policies will be reviewed, and staff will undergo additional training. We will work to prevent similar incidents in the future. Maya's mother exhaled quietly. The statement was cautious, carefully framed, but it was accountability in some form. Enough for a public acknowledgement, though far from the full justice they sought. As the press conference ended, the room emptied slowly. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered among themselves, and the owner departed with her usual poise, though her steps seemed less assured. Maya walked out beside her mother, head held high, the city lights beyond the windows bright and vast. Sighed, Maya breathed deeply. She had faced the person who had symbolized her humiliation. She had spoken truth to power in front of witnesses, cameras, and the world. The fight wasn't over, but she had reclaimed a piece of her dignity, publicly and irreversibly. Her mother smiled, holding her close. You did it, Maya. You spoke, and they listened. Maya nodded, a quiet resolve settling in her chest. The path ahead would still have challenges, critics, and systemic barriers, but she now knew she could face them. The humiliation that had once weighed her down was transformed into action, resistance, and voice. And somewhere deep inside she realized, victory wasn't just in public acknowledgement, it was in the reclamation of her own power. The following weeks were quieter but no less intense. Maya Thompson sat by her bedroom window, staring at the New York skyline as the city lights twinkled like distant stars. The glare of cameras, the endless notifications, and the viral videos had faded from her immediate life, but the weight of the ordeal lingered. Her mother sat beside her, a worn notebook open on her lap. People are still talking, she said softly. The airline's policies are under review. Some staff have been reprimanded. Your story. It's making a difference. Maya nodded, but her chest felt tight. Public acknowledgement was one thing, real change another. She had learned that institutions could issue statements, offer training, and promise reform, yet the culture, the assumptions, the microaggressions, the subtle bias, often persisted. She reflected on the flight, the confrontation, the press event. Each moment had been a test of courage, patience, and resilience. She remembered the stares, the whispers, the phones recording every tear. She remembered the airline owner's calculating gaze, the flight attendant's dismissive tone. And yet she had endured. Her mother placed a hand on hers. You did more than endure. You reclaimed your space, your voice, your dignity. You forced them to listen. That's remarkable. Maya exhaled slowly. The words felt heavy with truth. The humiliation she had endured hadn't disappeared, but it no longer held absolute power over her. She had learned that speaking out, asserting herself, and seeking justice were acts of resistance that could not be erased. School was different now. Some peers treated her with new respect, while others still whispered behind her back. But Maya had learned to navigate it, to separate validation from performance, to recognize who mattered in her life. She had discovered that courage often existed quietly, in the choices to stand firm despite fear, to speak truth despite judgment. One evening, she scrolled through the social media coverage. Articles praised her courage, op-eds debated systemic inequality, and advocacy groups highlighted her case as an example of institutional bias. She paused at one post, a short video of her mother speaking at a press conference, words echoing in her memory. People need to see injustice to confront it. Silence allows it to persist. Maya's thoughts wandered to the airline owner. She had witnessed the woman's power, her poise, and her authority. And yet, she had also seen cracks, the subtle shifts when truth was spoken aloud, the acknowledgement that power carried responsibility. Maya understood that change would be slow, incomplete, and often reluctant. But every small victory mattered. Every shift in perception, every correction of injustice, was a step forward. Her mother closed the notebook, smiling faintly. "You've grown through all of this. Not just in courage but in understanding. You've seen how people react, how systems protect themselves, and how persistence can create accountability." Maya leaned back, hands folded in her lap. She realized she carried both scars and strength. The fear, humiliation, and anxiety hadn't disappeared. They were etched into her memory, teaching lessons that no textbook ever could. She had discovered resilience in the face of power, dignity in the midst of judgment, and voice where silence had once prevailed. The city outside buzzed on, indifferent and relentless, yet Maya felt a sense of quiet victory. The airline had acknowledged the incident. Staff had faced consequences, and policies were being reviewed. The viral moment had sparked public dialogue about race, privilege, and institutional responsibility. And Maya, once powerless in that gleaming cabin, had emerged as a figure who refused to be erased. She turned to her mother. "I know the fight isn't over," she said softly. "But feel stronger now. I know I can handle it." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Yes, you can. And you did it with grace. Never forget that." Maya's eyes drifted to her reflection in the window. She saw a girl who had endured public humiliation, navigated social media storms, faced institutional power, and spoken truth to authority. She saw a girl who had resisted, demanded accountability, and reclaimed her dignity. And she realized something profound. The world could be cruel, biased, and unjust, but courage, voice, and persistence were forces that could challenge it. In the quiet of her room, Maya closed her eyes, letting the tension of weeks slowly unwind. She thought of first class, the aisle, the stairs, the whispers, and the owner's gaze. She thought of her mother, the press conference, the supporters who had rallied, and the systems slowly shifting in response. She had been a victim, but she was no longer defined by victimhood. She had become a participant in shaping truth and demanding justice. That realization settled over her like a quiet light, illuminating both scars and strength. And in that reflection, Maya found resilience, hope, and a sense of purpose. The fight for fairness, dignity, and accountability was far from over, but she had found her voice. And with it, she could face whatever came next. The weeks after the press conference brought subtle, tangible change. Maya Thompson could feel it in the way the world began to bend slightly to her presence. She returned to first-class spaces, not with fear, but with quiet awareness. Every step felt deliberate, every gesture measured, yet infused with the knowledge that she belonged. Her mother accompanied her on a flight to visit relatives, this time for leisure, not as a battleground. The cabin smelled of polished leather and coffee, sunlight reflecting off the windows in golden streaks. Maya walked confidently past the aisle, noticing the occasional glance, but she no longer recoiled. A flight attendant approached with a warm smile, extending a genuine greeting. "Welcome aboard, Maya. We're glad to have you with us." Maya returned a small smile. It was remarkable how a simple acknowledgement, free of judgment or skepticism, could feel revolutionary. The difference wasn't the seat, the cabin, or the service. It was recognition. Space could be claimed, respected, and affirmed when approached with integrity. Throughout the flight, Maya observed. She noticed how passengers interacted, how staff attended to needs, how subtle microaggressions could still linger in fleeting looks or offhand remarks. But now, armed with experience and understanding, she could navigate the environment, assert herself, and choose when to respond and when to let silence serve her. During the meal service, an elderly woman offered Maya a kind smile. "I saw your story online. You were very brave." Maya felt warmth rise in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. Recognition, she realized, could empower in ways that fear and judgment never could. Her mother leaned close. "See, you've changed how they perceive you. You've reclaimed your space just by being yourself." Maya nodded, thinking of the viral video that had started it all. That moment, once a symbol of humiliation, had become a catalyst for awareness, conversation, and accountability. The airline had issued policy reviews, some staff had faced consequences, and the public dialogue had shifted. Yet none of that would have mattered without her voice, her courage to claim that space despite fear. By the time they reached their destination, Maya felt lighter, yet aware. Reclaiming space wasn't a one-time act. It was continuous. It required vigilance, confidence, and resilience. She understood now that power could be challenged, authority could be questioned, and dignity could be maintained, even in environments designed to intimidate or exclude. Back at her relative's home, she found herself recounting the events of the flight to her cousin, who listened wide-eyed. "I can't believe people were so cruel," he said. "They didn't define me," Maya replied. "Not completely. I decided how I responded. That's what matters." Her mother watched her proudly. "It's not just about enduring. It's about reclaiming your space in the world, even when it feels hostile." Maya reflected on the concept. Space was more than a physical seat, a cabin, or a room. It was recognition, authority, dignity, and voice combined. The airline, the staff, and even the public had tried to define her, control her, and diminish her presence. But by speaking, resisting, and asserting herself, she had carved out a space that could not easily be challenged. Later that evening, she sat quietly by the window, notebook in hand. She began writing about courage, dignity, and resistance. Words flowed in a way they hadn't during the viral storm. She understood that reclaiming space wasn't just about surviving. It was about narrating, documenting, and inspiring. Every sentence became a declaration of presence. Maya paused, thinking of the airline owner. The woman had power, polish, and authority. But Maya now understood a deeper truth. Power could be interrogated, challenged, and held accountable. It could not erase the courage of those who refused to be silenced. Her mother interrupted her thoughts gently. "You've changed, Maya. Not just in confidence but in perspective. You see how to occupy space without being consumed by fear." Maya smiled faintly. "It feels good to know that I can exist without shrinking, even when others try to make me invisible." Her mother squeezed her hand. "That's a lesson many people never learn. You've learned it early, and you'll carry it with you forever." Maya exhaled, feeling a profound sense of grounding. The past weeks had been tumultuous, filled with humiliation, resistance, and public scrutiny. But through it all, she had discovered the capacity to reclaim her identity, assert her voice, and occupy spaces she had once feared. As night fell over the city, Maya realized something vital. Reclaiming space was not a singular act of defiance. It was ongoing, a series of choices, observations, and assertions. Every step, every word, every presence mattered. It was power exercised quietly but unmistakably. And in that quiet reclamation, she felt an unwavering sense of self. She belonged, not just in first-class seats or public platforms, but in every space she chose to occupy. The airline, the viral video, and the public scrutiny had all been instruments of trial. And Maya had passed, not just with dignity, but with strength. Weeks after the press conference, the ripple effects of Maya Thompson's courage were beginning to crystallize. The airline, once a fortress of polished authority, was showing signs of genuine accountability. Internal memos leaked online, carefully worded acknowledgments of systemic flaws, directives for improved training, and measures to prevent discrimination. Public statements now emphasized not just policy but culture. Maya read them with cautious optimism, aware that words alone could not erase past harm, but they were a start. The airline owner, once untouchable in her confidence, now faced scrutiny. Journalists had followed the story, dissecting her earlier evasive statements and contrasting them with Maya's articulate, unwavering testimony. Social media amplified inconsistencies in the company's handling of complaints. It became clear that the power she wielded so effortlessly in the first-class aisle had limits, especially when confronted with truth, evidence, and public accountability. Maya sat in a local cafe, scrolling through an article detailing the airline's new policies. Staff were required to undergo diversity and sensitivity training, and a formal complaint review process had been established. Passengers who experienced discrimination could now escalate complaints directly to corporate oversight. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And it was progress born in large part from Maya's refusal to remain silent. Her mother leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee. "You did this," she said softly. "Not just for yourself, but for anyone who might face the same thing in the future. That's real change." Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup. The memory of the flight, the whispers, the stares, the smirks, was still vivid. But now they were markers of her journey, not shackles. The humiliation she had endured had been transformed into leverage, into lessons, into progress. One afternoon, she received a letter from the airline. A formal apology, handwritten and signed by the owner herself. It acknowledged the specific incident, admitted lapses in judgment, and expressed commitment to prevent similar events in the future. It was meticulous, cautious, but unmistakably sincere. Maya read it twice, a subtle mixture of satisfaction and lingering disbelief washing over her. "You see," her mother said, smiling, "even the person who caused you pain had to acknowledge your truth. That's poetic justice." Maya held the letter close, feeling a strange sense of closure. Justice, she realized, wasn't always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it was measured, bureaucratic, and deliberate. But acknowledgement had power. Recognition of wrongdoing had power. And her resilience, the courage to face humiliation and demand accountability, was the strongest power of all. School life returned to a semblance of normalcy. Some peers had followed her story, offering support and admiration. Others, once critical, seemed to think twice before passing judgment. Maya learned to navigate social spaces with a quiet confidence, aware of past trauma but unbound by it. Her voice had been heard, her dignity reclaimed, and with it came a subtle authority, the knowledge that she could face power without shrinking, and that truth could not be silenced. Maya began writing more intentionally. Essays, articles, and reflections on systemic bias, public accountability, and resilience flowed from her pen. Her words reached classmates, teachers, and online audiences, sparking conversation and reflection. She realized that sharing her experience, narrating it honestly without embellishment or malice, was a form of continued resistance, an assertion of space and identity. Months later, she received an invitation to speak at a youth leadership forum focused on advocacy, equality, and courage. Standing before a crowd of attentive students, she felt a surge of recognition. This was more than a personal victory. Her experience had become a catalyst, a lesson in resilience and agency for others. "I learned," she began, voice steady, "that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the act of moving forward despite it. That power exists in all of us. And no matter how small or young or underestimated we might be, we can claim our space and demand accountability when others try to deny it." Applause filled the room, warm and affirming. Maya smiled, feeling a quiet sense of completion. Her journey, from humiliation to resistance, from public scrutiny to poetic justice, had not been easy, but it had been transformative. Later, walking home with her mother, She reflected on the path she had traveled. The viral video, the press conferences, the legal and social pushback, the confrontation with authority. All of it had left scars. But those scars were no longer wounds. They were marks of growth, symbols of a young girl who had refused to be erased. Her mother squeezed her hand. "You've reclaimed your space, Maya. And the world has had to recognize you. That's not something anyone can take away." Maya nodded, eyes bright. "I know. And I'll keep reclaiming it. Wherever I go, whatever happens, I won't shrink. I won't hide. I'll speak, I'll act, and I'll make sure truth is seen." As they walked through the bustling streets, Maya felt the city around her, bright, chaotic, and full of possibility. The humiliation, the fear, and the public scrutiny had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She had faced systemic power, challenged injustice, and demanded accountability. She had survived. She had resisted. And she had won, not with vengeance, but with dignity, courage, and unwavering voice. The airline, the owner, the staff, they had been forced to acknowledge their actions, confront the consequences, and begin the slow process of change. And Maya Thompson, had claimed something far greater than a seat in first class. She had claimed her right to exist fully, unapologetically, and with the knowledge that her voice mattered. In that reclamation she found peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the triumph over it. Not the erasure of past harm, but the transformation of its power. And as the city lights stretched into the distance, Maya knew, with quiet certainty, that she would carry this resilience for the rest of her life.